Please. Thank you so much for coming. There's a microphone right there for you.
Thank you so much, Cameron, for having me. Hello, everyone. Good evening.
The last time you were here in Toronto for TIFF, it was 2014. We were premiering Mary Kom. You had a whirlwind trip through the city, and then you went on to make Quantico.
Yes.
A lot's changed in 3 years.
Yeah, a little bit.
What has that time been like for you?
A whirlwind, like you said. It's been a lot. It's been a big change. Working in India, my career has been, it's been a lot of things. I've always tried to sort of mold it in a different way. I've always tried to pick paths which for females in India might be not conventional, like Mary Kom, which was premiered right here on this in this auditorium, and I think, you know, and that was a big change for me. And then when Quantico happened, I was signed with a talent deal with ABC, and I remember having a conversation with them saying that, you know what, if you're coming to me with a talent deal, can we just make sure that I don't have to do a part which is a stereotype of what, you know, America would think an Indian would be, like My Big Fat Punjabi Wedding, or like, you know, one of those, or like I play a really, you know, hot chick standing behind a guy.
So you were setting your terms right away?
Yes, from the beginning.
With an American network?
Yes, with an And to give credit to that American network, they understood that. And they found me a show. I mean, I read 26 scripts. And they found me a show which had nothing to do with my ethnicity. Yes, I play an Indian girl, but that just happens to be a part of the story. And that was important to me, Cameron. When I went to school in America, which was when I was 13 to about 16, I didn't see anyone who looked like me on television. I still don't see that many people who look like me on television or movies, for that matter. So when I got the opportunity to make that change, I sort of stood my ground, not knowing what that meant. And it worked out. So this whirlwind has, I think it paid up. So it was good.
It's moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you went to school in the U.S. between the ages of 13 and 16. First of all, why did you do that? And what was that change like?
Well, it was... My parents, my mom, who's in the audience somewhere, will be able to be testify for that.
Dr. Madhu Chopra is here,
yeah,
producer
with
Priyanka at Purple Pebble.
But when I was 12, my mom decided, her sisters lived in America. So she was like, all right, let's get the kids and go for a vacation. So we came for summer vacation which was Indianapolis at that point, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, actually. And yeah.
You moved from India to Iowa.
Yeah, Cedar. Yeah, go
That's
figure.
That's a change.
But it was incredible, actually. So we came here for a visit, and I was so excited that kids didn't have to wear uniforms in school here. Whereas in India, we have to wear uniforms when we go to school because so it's equality for all children. And, you know, some kids can afford and some kids can't afford great clothes. So that was the reason. But I was so excited as a 13-year-old girl that I didn't have to wear a uniform and I could wear short skirts. And like I went to my cousin's school and girls were wearing all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And that was the reason I decided to stay in America. And I told my mom at 13, of course, I didn't tell her my reason at that point. But she probably wouldn't have agreed. But I told her, you know, I want to study here. And my parents always raised me as a thinking girl, you know, both me and my brother. There was never any disparity between us, whether I was a boy, or whether he was a boy or I was a girl. And they gave us a thinking mind. And we had a conversation about pros and cons. And my mom said, all right, fine. And I stayed with her sister for 4 years. It just started like that.
Did any part of you change in that time?
Yes. The fact that these were my most formative years, you know, your adolescent years are where you really, the kind of music you'll always remember for the rest of your life will be your teenage years. The kind of TV shows you're most influenced by.
What were you listening to? I'm curious. Do you remember any of the songs?
Yeah, I actually do. I was a huge hip-hop fan. I wanted to marry Tupac Shakur at that time. Guys, don't laugh. I wore black for like 20 days after he
when he died?
I took it seriously. Don't break my heart right now. Tupac, I grew up on like TLC. I really grew up on rap and hip-hop a lot. And I think that pop culture really influenced me while I was in America. The reason I think I'm a little bit of an amalgamation of the East and the West is because I was very pop culturally driven while I was in America at that time.
Now, doing this, growing up in America as someone who's just landed essentially as a 12, 13-year-old, it's different, I think, for girls than it is for boys. I heard a story where you called your mother at some point, and you were in Iowa, I suppose, and your mother's back home in India, and you said, "Mom, people are looking at me." And you had never experienced that before. Tell us about that.
Well, when I landed into Cedar Rapids and I started going to school there, I was the only Indian girl in my whole school. Or maybe there was another one who was a senior, but I don't remember. But this is as a like a ninth grade, and it was weird because I would walk in and I had an Indian accent, right? So when I spoke to people, it used to cock their heads and be like, "Excuse me."
You can really do that accent.
Sorry, why? But it took me a little bit to understand that it was just the fact that they hadn't experienced anybody like me. And I remember I used to get asked, and maybe this was a Cedar Rapids thing, but I don't know, but I used to get asked really funny questions in ninth grade. Like, do you find gold in your rivers? And I was like, that's the other Indians. It's not that, just... And like, do you take an elephant to school? Like I
Come
was,
on,
and
really?
this is like 97.
Right.
This is not even like whatever.
Yeah.
It's like 97. But I used to get asked that question, and I remember I was doing world history class, and I did this big presentation on India and Mumbai about how we actually had we had high buildings, and we had like Mercedes and like big cars, and there were millionaires that came out of India, and people actually spoke English. And it was quite a revelation for my class. And I think, I took it upon myself to educate. So after that, people did not ask me those questions. Instead of getting offended, I kind of did this whole thing in ninth grade.
Uh-huh. So when they were looking at you, it was because you were new and you were one of the few Indians they'd seen in Cedar Rapids, not because you're Priyanka Chopra. No. Okay.
That had nothing to do with that.
All right, okay.
Ask my crush. He had green hair.
Really? We've all got those high school memories. Not everything works out.
Oh, Cameron.
Let's not go back there. I know. I don't.
Yeah, we shouldn't.
It's all right.
It's
It's a
go
long
back
time
there.
ago. I don't need sympathy.
Yeah,
it's
it's heartbreaking.
India has the most prolific film industry in the world. More films, more stars, more movie fans than anywhere else. When I go there, that's one of the things I love. It is the most movie-mad country in the planet, on the planet. You became a big star in India, and then you did something that had never been done before, which is to also become a star in North America, to work both in the largest film industry in India, but also in Hollywood, and no one else has done that. Tell me about what it took to do it and why you wanted to do both.
Well, because first of all, I don't think one was less than the other, that they were mutually exclusive. I feel like the world has become such a small place right now. We on our cell phones can sit and watch an Iranian movie or an American movie or an Indian film. It doesn't matter. So that was one big reason why I did not want to not do Indian films anymore and only work here. But secondly, I think that when this opportunity came my way, I sort of saw it as a way of breaking the glass ceiling for people who look like me. I have a lot of friends who are in the business in Hollywood, who come from South Asian backgrounds, and I had always heard them talking about how difficult it is to get parts which are relevant for Indian actors or just actors who don't look like norm in entertainment, and I never understood that till I started working here. I remember and this was just 2 years ago, probably after Quantico, that I was asked to not be a part of a movie because I was too ethnic. And that was, yeah. First of all, everyone has an ethnicity.
Exactly, right?
Even Caucasian is an ethnicity. But so I was too ethnic for the part, and it was a mainstream American part. So I remember my agent being extremely he didn't know how to tell me that. And he was being really skirting around the issue, and I said to him, I was like, Brad, just tell me. And he was like, Priyanka, I don't know how to say that in 2017, that this was actually a reason. Yeah. They could at least make up a reason saying she didn't work.
I know.
Don't be so on the nose about it.
I know, my God,
and
it's amazing.
but they said the reasoning that was given was that we'll have to explain how an Indian girl is this character in mainstream. Like, we'll have to explain where her parents came from and what was she doing in America.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And, I didn't realize that that's how hard it was until I came here. And now I've really taken it very personally. And whether it happens for me or it doesn't, but I really do hope for the future generation that they don't have to deal with this because of what me and my colleagues will do. Because I want to stick my feet in and be like, no, that is not what we're going to stand for. Look at the world around you. Look at North America right now. It's a melting pot of cultures from everywhere around the world. You cannot turn around and tell one kid or one person or one type of person because of the color of their skin that they need to be treated a certain way. And yes, we've done it for centuries, but come on now. We're in the 21st century and we really need to be able to step up for ourselves and the future generations. So yeah, it's been extremely hard to have had a career where, you know, everyone knows me and you know, I look like everybody else, and then to come into a country and not have that, and yet, but I've had an extremely amazing welcome from America too. It's not like it's only been this. I've had so much love from, whether it's been the press, whether it's from, you know, the film industry, who've actually welcomed me and said that, you know what, you're a good actor and you deserve this opportunity. So it's a dichotomy, but yes, I am also talking about the parts that are hard.
It sounds to me that you are someone who's always challenged the status quo. You do not accept things as they are if you're not happy with them. And you see that in your films as well. We have a number of clips I want to share with the audience, but the first one is from ANDAAZ, one of your very first roles in 2003, your first big role, really.
That stresses me out. 2003. Really?
Ancient history, right?
Let's not call it ancient either. Just history.
Right, it's not that long ago. I mean, come on. Anyhow, this is one of your first big roles, and just 3 years after you won the Miss World competition. And this is a scene near the end of the film. Your character, Jia's sister-in-law, Kajal, has just lost her husband in a plane crash, and she arrives at a party wearing a wedding sari rather than mourning clothing. And again, a character who is someone who is challenging the status quo. Let's have a look at this clip from ANDAAZ. Nice.
Damn, I didn't even remember that.
You didn't remember that? There you are.
I was feisty, yeah.
Schooling the aunties, right?
Yeah, I schooled them aunties, all right. Wow. Yeah, that was my first movie.
And is that the kind of role that you were looking for when it came your way? Someone that was a strong woman?
I don't think it was something that I thought about, but I always tended to veer towards parts which gave women a standing or something to say. It's a very interesting story, and I've told this a bunch of times, and you may have heard it, but I'll say it again. I remember when I was just starting out in movies, and I was meeting a lot of film producers. There was this one producer I was talking to about this big movie with some big major male lead actors. And he said, well, if your remuneration is not what we're willing to give you, and if your scheduling is not according to these two boys, then, well, it'll be hard for us to take you in the movie. And so my representation at that point was like, well, you know, she's Miss World. And he was like, listen, let's keep it real. Girls are replaceable, okay? So who are people coming to watch in a movie? The guy on the poster. The girl is standing where? Behind him. So if I change her and I get another girl, she's still going to be doing the same thing. If I don't get another girl, I'll just launch a new actress. And I remember sitting there in that office, and I must have been all of 19 or 20, and somewhere, I think psychologically it really affected me. I was like, wow, we are really replaceable. I don't want to be replaceable. And I think that lent me towards doing the paths that I chose eventually through my career. And they were not mainstream. And they were not what leading ladies do. You know, they were not norm, because leading ladies don't say lines like that. That's why I was a supporting part in this movie, by the way. It's true.
But you got the best lines, it sounds like.
Yeah, but it was the supporting part. Because that's what supporting parts can do. The leading ladies weren't supposed to be that. We were supposed to be coy and like shy and never say anything and look pretty and have wind in our hair. And I still love wind in my hair, by the way. I act better with it, but I really wanted to change the game a little, and I think that started subconsciously.
Tell us a little bit more about that culture in the Bollywood industry of the hero and then the ladies or the girls behind him.
I think it's Hollywood too.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the movies eventually that do the numbers that they do. Very few films that you will see will actually touch the numbers that male films do. And why is that? Isn't that a reflection on us as a society? That we end up going watching those films and we make the numbers for the movies which are led by the boys. And isn't it a reflection on Hollywood or on Bollywood or any film industry that they say, all right, the numbers come from here, so let's just make these kind of movies. There are very few which have the ability to turn around and say, like we were talking about backstage, we've just about had our Wonder Woman, which is the first female big superhero movie directed by a female director. And that's in 2017. So it's a cycle of demand and supply. So while people go watch it, as soon as the audience starts saying, oh my God, we love this movie, it doesn't matter if the main lead is a male or a female, is when people are going to start making those films. And at the same time, those producers need to turn around and say, you know what, we don't care about who's coming to watch the films, we still want to make it. And that's where I think entertainment is going towards now.
So you know the film industry very well. You know producers, you know financiers. Wonder Woman was a massive hit. Is that enough to make a change? Do people listen to that kind of success?
It's a big dent.
Yeah.
It's definitely a big dent. It's a dent in the conversation. It's me being able to have an example to cite on the stage right now when we're talking about global entertainment. And that gives us the crutch to stand on something and say, all right, this happened. It can happen again. Just give us opportunities to make it happen. Let's make great films and let's be, let gender not be a reason why a film is made or greenlit.
Interesting. Let's talk about another film that I think steps forward from what you're talking about, which is Fashion, 2008, and a film that is set within a world primarily of women, actually very different from a typical commercial movie in India. What attracted you to that project?
So this was at a time when female-led films were considered a big risk. And this was just 2008. And it was considered that, a female-led film is done by female actors at the end of their careers when they're like, oh, I want to win an award before I go down, So I was told that by so many filmmakers, and that, this is going to be a big risk. If the film doesn't do well, it's going to be on you. And I was just in the movies about 4 or 5 years, but the story resonated with me so much. And it was one of the first few female-led films which opened to a big number on a Friday. Not eventually did a big number, but which opened to a big number on Friday. And that was such a big dent in the conversation for female actors. I remember at that time. And it just, I don't know, just because everyone told me I shouldn't do it, I think I wanted to do it because of that.
It's also set within the world of fame and the entertainment industry and the fashion world, similar to, I guess, what the film world is like. We've got a scene I want to show from Fashion where your character finds out that her big billboard has been replaced. Let's look at that scene from Fashion. We'll come back and talk.
That was a really intense film.
What do you recall from the impact that Fashion had when it was released in 2008? How did it change things?
I was really nervous because this film had me doing all the things a leading lady would not do. Smoking, drinking, sleeping around, everything. But it spoke of the truth. And the truth always resonates with me. And I feel like in filmmaking, the audience is extremely smart. I know when I watch a movie, I don't like my intelligence to be taken for granted. And when we're talking about the world of fashion, you've got to show it for what it is. So being coy was not cool at that point. And I liked the fact that I was pushing the envelope. I remember being extremely nervous because we were a rated R movie at that time, which was an adult movie. And we were releasing with a really big, huge blockbuster with us. I just did not think that anything would happen with this movie, but the truth resonates because we were true to what the story was, and that's what it is. Fame is transient, and she replaced someone, and then she was replaced, and that happens to everyone.
It strikes me that there are so many women in the big cities in India and all throughout the Indian diaspora who are exactly like the character that you played, who are living independent lives, who are living lives that's very much connected, between the East and the West, who are urban, cosmopolitan women, contemporary women. But for a long time, you didn't see that in Indian commercial movies. And around this time, in 2008, fashion began a kind of a wave of other movies. And suddenly, you began to see the lives of contemporary women, empowered women on the big screen in India. What was that like when that kind of revolution almost was happening there?
I felt very proud that I could be, you know, someone who maybe was one of the first few people who pioneered that, in my generation at least. Because the conversation in India is still, you know, you still skirt around the issues a little bit. But these movies, including fashion being one of the first to do that, gave women a power to say, okay, it's all right to talk about it. That many people have gone to see this movie, which means I can be true to who I am. I don't have to always hide and live behind the garb of what's norm or what society tells me I should be. And basically, that's what feminism is. And I think this started a revolution of feminism in Indian movies, which still continues right now.
So a film like Fashion would do well in Bombay, in the big cities in India, in London, in Durban, in Toronto, in New York, places like that. But it also plays in smaller centers, and eventually it'll reach its way to villages in India where sometimes the culture is very different and the traditions are very different. Was that a kind of a tension? And do you have any concerns about a film like Fashion playing a place where women like this weren't so common?
Yes, it is a big concern because there's a big distance between urban India and rural India, almost like America, the coasts and Middle America. You know, the difference between the two is sort of like what India is. So where an urban woman or people, not just women, people who may have watched this film would be like, all right, we know women like this, or we know stories like this, and it's normal. Someone sitting in a small town or a small village watching it would think, oh my God, the fashion industry sucks. Yeah. Or I'm never going to send my daughter to become a model. You know, so yeah, there will be those people who will, you know, see this for being an on-the-nose depiction of what the fashion industry is. But, you know, you can't please everyone. Yeah, You've just got to push the envelope and keep hoping that people will be able to open their minds to seeing what the world is like today.
Mm-hmm. The fashion industry has been a big part of your career as well, of course, as a model and Miss World and all of the magazine covers and things that you've done. What's your take on it now as you have spent more time in the industry? How do you feel about the image that you have to present as a part of fashion?
I've always tried to be a little bit true to me in everything that I do. It's very hard to do in fashion, but since I've become an actor, it's not that difficult. When you're a model, you're not supposed to have your own identity, right? It's about the clothes. It's about
the look.
About the look, and it's about what's put on you. You're a clothes horse. But as an actor, I'm being featured on magazine covers for my personality. So everything that I do is an extension of that. So I always try, and which is why it's become a lot more easier in terms of like when I started modeling, I could not have a point of view at all. So
that must have been hard for you.
Yeah.
I'm just guessing.
Thanks. Thank God I became an actor.
Definitely. We've got a clip from BARFI from 2012, which was, again, a complete change. You've done so many different things in your career, and it's still quite young. I mean, you've got a lot to go. In this case, you're playing a woman who has autism. And it's a fascinating story because it's a kind of character, and also the character played by Ranbir Kapoor, your co-star in the film, that up until this point, we didn't see much in Indian cinema. And after that, we began to see a little bit more. There were other films like Black and others that were suddenly dealing with different forms of ability and disability. But can you tell us a little bit about choosing to make BARFI and what you wanted to explore in that role?
Well, I remember I was in New York shooting with Ranbir when he told me he was going to be doing this film, and the director, who's Anurag Basu, one of my favorite filmmakers, wanted to approach me for this film. So I thought it would be like another one of those big Bollywood movies that, you know, we always do. And then I came back to Mumbai, and he came home to meet me, and I remember I was coming from an event, so I was all glammed up, like in my gown, and my hair did, and I had my nails did, and all that. And I walk into my house, and I was like, oh, Anurag sir, hi. And he just stood up, and he was like, I gotta go. And I said, what happened? He was like, I think this will be really difficult for me. I said, I don't understand what this means. And he said, I came to you to play a 19-year-old autistic girl who is from Calcutta, and all that cannot be what I'm thinking. And of course, I don't like the word no, right? So I went to his office the next day, and I said, listen, just hear me out and sit down with me for 5 minutes. I said, give me 5 days. Let me just work with you. And even I don't want to do something which would make someone with disability look like a caricature. Give me an opportunity to create this. And there was no precedent to this character. So it wasn't like from blah, blah, blah movie, even in Hollywood, or blah, blah, blah movie from India. It was just something we had to create. And we sat for 5 days. We went to all these special schools with special kids, spent time with them. I did videos. I practiced my walk. We did mannerisms. And 5 days later, she was born. And that's how he took me in the movie.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You convinced him.
I did. I was like, you do not say no to me.
Learn his lesson.
Not on efficiency.
All right. Let's look at a clip from BARFI.
That is one of my favorite films.
It's a great performance. And you were able to put that character together in the 5 initial days that you spent with the director?
Yeah. It just took those 5 days.
Huh.
Because once you know the periphery or the parameters of a character, then it can be thrown into any scene and it would have, it takes form. Like this scene, I remember, Anurag sir is a director who doesn't like to direct really. He just lets you be. And you do the scene just sort of figuring it out on your own, and then he will direct you in the direction he wants to go. So he likes actors to bring their own initiative. And autistic people, from what I learned, don't like touch and feel. They don't, it's such a large spectrum actually, but the one that we were working with, don't come into my vicinity. It throws them off a little bit. So this head touch was their version of a kiss. Because she never liked to be touched. And it was all of these little things that sort of just organically happened through knowing what mine and Ranbir's characters were. And it was one of the most special experiences as an actor to go through in this film.
When you're building a character, whether it's in BARFI or in any of your other work, what do you start from? What are the first building blocks? Is it the physical elements? Is it the backstory? Where do you start?
I remember I wanted to do a workshop for a film I did called Saath Khoon Maaf with Pankaj Kapoor, who's a very prolific theatre and film actor in India. And I went to him and I said, sir, I'd love to do a workshop with you. Just 10 days, give me some of your time and just we'll go through this character. And he said, why do you need a workshop? And I said, because I want to get into the nuances of the film. And I was like, being an actor, and I want to take it seriously. Yes. And he said, have you read the script? I said, yes, sir, I have. And he said, how many times? I said, sir, 5 times. He said, read it 10 more times. I said, why? He said, the silences between lines give you the intention of a writer. So you have to know the intention of a writer. Why is this scene what it is? And after this scene, why does that one come in next? Why not something else? Because there's got to be an intention. And that really changed me. So I start with reading a script so many times, understanding why a character goes from one scene to the other. The physicality is the last thing you do. The mental place of where a character is, where they start from, like theater, right? When you walk into a stage and when you walk out of the stage, what happens in between is the story. But what happens from the time they walked out to the next time you walk in? That's what defines the next scene. So I work with that for understanding my characters.
Does who you're acting with or against, does that make a difference in terms of your performance
I know the
style?
actor sucks, yeah. It wouldn't help. I've had those too.
But there's so many different styles as well. Some people are very method, some people don't like to, some people improvise a lot. Are there also differences between, say, a Ranbir Kapoor and his training and a Zac Efron in terms of how they might act with you?
Yeah, completely. Like Zac he knows his lines, he needs to rehearse his lines, he talk to the director and he just keeps saying them and he works out in the middle the whole time.
Does he really?
The whole time. He does lines like this with a resistance
Really?
band. Yeah.
Would he want us to know that?
Well, I've said it in 100 interviews.
Okay, all right.
I'll find out when I meet him next time. But and Ranbir, on the other hand, I don't even know if he knows his lines.
Really?
Like when he comes on set, he's just like, and he walks in and then he says his lines and he knows them. So, I mean, different people have different methods. I've worked with amazing method actors, which also is a different point of view. Like I'm a little bit more spontaneous, and that can get dangerous sometimes because, you know, you might not hit the nail on the head every single time, but when you do, it's sort of magic because you wouldn't have done it before and you're never going to do it again. But at the same time, I mean, there are different schools of thought. So when you work with an actor, like I worked with a co-actor of mine who loves rehearsals, and I hate rehearsals. I like doing mechanical rehearsals. Like I'm going to walk here and then I'm going to pick up that spoon and I'm going to say my line. But then I've worked with actors who like need to know when they're going to laugh and when the other person's going to laugh. And I don't know that. I don't know what happens between action and cut. So those times are really difficult, I guess. But when you watch the movie at the end of it, I mean, you never know. And those problems existed. It's actually the director's problem. He has to deal with it.
Now, we were thrilled 3 years ago to present the premiere of Mary Kom here at the festival. And when I saw this film, I saw it in Bombay, and I was impressed on many levels. But I think, first of all, with what must have been a ridiculously intensive training period for you. You play a boxer, a championship boxer, and it looks like you can do this. It looks real.
Well, if you throw me into a boxing ring, I hold my own. I probably won't survive.
I am not going to box you because I know I'd lose.
Let's just say I'm a good actor.
Okay.
I don't know boxing.
Well, really? Okay, well, it looks real. In addition to just the physical training for that film, it's a very empowering story of a woman who fights for what she wants in a field where she's not even supposed to be. This is something that's not typically done by women, not just in India, but in most places. Tell us a little bit about deciding to do Mary Kom, where this is your movie, you're the lead, you made this happen.
On so many levels, this was a very challenging movie, and that's what excited me even more. Give me something difficult and I'll be the first one to say yes. But this was a movie about Northeast India, first of all, which sometimes Assam, Sikkim, that whole region does not even get seen as a part of the country. So they're sort of ignored. Now that I didn't know when I first took on the film. I knew that after I spent time with Mary and her family in...
It's based on a true story.
Yes, this is a
boxer.
true story of a 5-time boxing champion, world champion, and no one knew her name when we were starting. I mean, people knew of her, but they didn't know what she looked like. They didn't know... In normal pop culture, you didn't really know her. If you've read an article about her, maybe. She was the daughter of rice paddy farmers, extreme poverty, decided to become a boxer. She was supposed to do, you know, race and relay because that's what girls do. But she wanted to become a boxer. Her parents were against it. Her father was completely against it. She fought the grain. And the year Mary decided to become a boxer, she worked so hard for it. That's the year boxing became a legitimate national game in India. So she is someone who really stands for not just the region she comes from, which is very oppressed in India, but also for women trying to say that I'm not going to stand for what norm is. And I want to do something. Yeah, okay, a man does it. And if I'm not good enough, it's fine, I'll fail. But let me try. Give me the opportunity to try. It's that hunger that she had that just inspired me so much to want to be her. I mean, I don't even physically look like her. But I just wanted to be able to give myself that. And I worked very closely with her and her family, and to understand the emotion behind everything that went through for her and how hard it was. But it really changed me as a person as well doing this film, I think.
Let's look at a clip from Mary Kom. It's great stuff.
Yeah, but it's such an, like, I love this scene because it's such an important thing that the one thing you take away from a woman is her work when she stands up for herself, because you can, you know, and as soon as you take away a woman's work, what does she stand for? What does she stand on? What feet does she stand on? And this scene is such a great way of explaining that, because in so many places in the world, powerful, not just men, but powerful people turn around and say, all right, you know what, she doesn't want to do it on my terms, take away the movie that she was going to sign. Or like the scene in Fashion, replace her with another girl. Or, you know, I'm going to destroy your career and make you forget the word boxing. This has happened, and you've seen like 3 or 4 clips which sort of talk about the same thing.
There's a theme here.
Yeah, looks like there's a theme in my career. But it's happened to me too. I mean, I've had, not something I talk about too much, but I've had people who've taken away films from me because I might not agree with them, or I might not have, you know, may have let myself into the same situations with other, which they may have been used to, you know, in catering to people and stuff like that. And yeah, your work is taken away from you. And then you have to start all over again and say, all right, you can do that. Let me start smaller. And maybe I'll grow. And then you're pushed off again. And then you start small again. And that's like a constant journey that happens to a lot of women around the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, including me.
You, though, have a drive that I think cannot be defeated. And many women don't.
Not yet, at least.
Not yet.
We don't know going forward.
Where does that come from?
I think it was my upbringing, in a way. My parents were a huge, huge part of giving me a sort of strength. I remember just recently I was in the car with my mum, and I was really nervous about entering some party because there was, you know, a few people there that didn't really particularly care for me, and I didn't care for them. And I was in the car, and I was like, Mom, I don't want to go for this party. I'm not feeling very great. And, you know, she just looked at me and she said, I didn't raise a coward. And I was like, well, that does it. All right. And this was like 10 days ago. Yeah.
Still works.
Yeah.
Right?
It definitely did.
Yeah.
I walked in and owned that party.
Yeah.
So I think my parents sort of raised me like that, you know, if you have not, and she says, and my parents say this to me so often, my mom still says it even after my dad's passed, that if you've not done anything wrong, there's nothing to be afraid of. If you have not deliberately decided to be malicious or hurt someone, stand up and scream on top of your voice, and there's nothing to be afraid of.
Your parents were both military doctors, is
Yes.
that right? Did they give you military discipline?
Actually, well, not in a enforced kind of
Oh,
way.
600 hours, that kind of thing, no.
My
Okay.
dad was always late. My dad was always late for anything personal. At work, he'd be like suited, booted, his, you know, his uniform. It used to be our tradition because we wear uniforms to school. So my dad and I would like iron out our uniforms together at night. It was like our thing to do. But I really think my parents being in the army, or me being raised as an army daughter, instilled a sense of discipline and respect for time for people. I mean, you've met enough Indian people, Cameron, to know that we have a thing called IST, right? Yeah, there you go. It's called Indian Standard Time. We're always at least 15 to half an hour late. Yeah, at least 15 minutes. But so embarrassing to admit, but it's the truth. But I think being in the army, I've sort of, I respect people's time. I respect their ideas. I respect a discipline and a work ethic. If you give professionalism to your job, professionalism comes back to you. I really believe that. If you give respect and not take it for granted. And that's something I think being raised as an army daughter really taught me.
Okay. That leads me to Quantico, and
Pretty close to the army. I mean, it's the FBI.
you know, it's the FBI, exactly. Yeah. And this, of course, the series that started in 2015, shooting in Montreal, actually, which is nice.
We started with Montreal.
And where you play an FBI agent, kind of a thriller story, and has been incredibly successful, I think, and introduced you to a whole new audience here. So let's look at a clip from Quantico. This is a scene from the first season. You play Alex Parrish, of course, an FBI recruit who's been wrongly accused of terrorism. And in this scene, you've met with hackers who are streaming a message from her explaining her innocence from Quantico.
Isn't that so relevant even right now?
Yes,
Like,
it is.
Don't shoot first and ask questions later.
Yeah. Still dealing with that.
3 years later.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that, actually. So Quantico is very much related to what's going on in this current era, the insecurity that people feel throughout the world because of terrorism, and just not knowing, who to trust, where to look. What role has the show played, do you think, in terms of just generating a conversation around these? It goes a little bit deeper.
I think when we were talking about this earlier, this part was not written for someone who, it was not written for an Indian girl. It was written for an American girl. So when I got the part, I think the writers just got really excited and ran with the whole, she's Indian thing, and brought about layers and conversations which were imperative and important in the story. They just loved the idea that they could talk about something that was topical, they could talk about something that was actually happening in the world around people. Everyone, in fact. What is terrorism? Who is a terrorist? And we're talking about domestic terrorism, which is huge in America in this show. So I think what this show sort of did, especially in its first season when it came out, was sort of give people a place a face to talk about, and situations which lent them to saying, all right, this could happen to someone like this. Why would this happen? Oh my God, I know someone who, not framing, but I know someone who I may have considered wrongly, or I may have racially profiled, which may not have been true. This show went to about 50-something countries in its first season. And that conversation became so prevalent. And I remember when I was in France, I had all of these, and you know the whole terrorism thing that's happening there. And I had all of these young girls that came up to me and started talking to me about what it actually meant. What does terrorism mean? Who is a terrorist? And what does a terrorist look like? And I think this show sort of started that conversation in a way. And I was very, very proud to be a part of it.
You've made pop music, you've done a lot of super fun things, but your work gets serious sometimes. You really do go deep in terms of some of the issues that your work addresses. I want to ask you about Purple Pebble, which I'm learning to say Purple Pebble Pictures.
It's just one pebble. Because there's just one me.
Okay. And the company that you set up, through which you produce films in India, is also dealing with some quite serious issues, and working with filmmakers who are from regions or working in regions outside of the dominant industries often. Tell us about why that's important to you.
Well, when I set up the production company, which was actually my mother's brainchild, because she said that, you have such a voice, you've got to be able to use it. And I said, I don't know how to make movies. And she was like, let me set up the rest of it for you. You just come and tell me what kind of film you want to make. And the idea started from there, that we were a very small production company. And I said, if I have a voice to be able to make films, I want to make content-driven films. I don't care if they're small indie movies. I know there's an audience for films which are good, which have stories to tell. And at the same time, I really got excited because I was raised in various parts of India because of the army. My parents kept moving around. So I was influenced by a lot of cultures. Every state in India, for people who don't know that, has a different written and spoken language, not a dialect, like French, Spanish, German, like as different as that. So each state, so imagine like Massachusetts having a different language, written and spoken, or like Florida having a different language, or New York having one. So to me, and each state has its own local film industry, which is so fascinating because these are these small films that come out, and there are people from different states, all over the world who actually go out and watch them. But these film industries are not given the kind of importance that Hindi movies are because Hindi is so predominant. And for me, it was really important because I was raised in so many states to find stories that come out of small villages or small towns or filmmakers that actually want to tell a story which is different and may not be, and the filmmakers might not have, a grandfather that's been in the movies or like an uncle that's in the movies, someone who can recommend them, but just people who have voices. And that was the reason we set up Purple Pebble Pictures. And so far, we've had about 5 films, and all my filmmakers have been first-time directors. And we've had a lot of new talent that's come in. In fact, Pahuna, the film that's premiering, thank you, tomorrow, also has a first-time filmmaker. And our cast is led by 2 kids who are extremely cute. But outside of that, never acted before, from a small village in Sikkim, and were taken in and trained by my director's mum. And to learn how to act, because she's a graduate from a film school. And that's how this film happened. And that's the kind of stories I wanted to be able to tell, because everyone tells these big movies and big stories. And I wanted to give I didn't have that foothold when I came into the movie business. So I sort of wanted to be a production house that gave people that.
We have a clip I want to show from Pahuna, The Little Visitors. The story is of a family that has to leave to flee a civil conflict in Nepal. They cross over into India. The kids get separated from the rest of the parents, the rest of the family, the parents. And you've got 2 young children and a baby who are suddenly on their own in the forest. So let's have a look at this clip from Pahuna.
Thank you. This is a super special film on many, many levels. Again, I don't think it should be a novelty to say, but our director is a female director, is a first-time director, Paki Tarwala. She should be here somewhere. And this film is the first film that has ever come out of Sikkim. Sikkim, ever. Really? It was the first film in the history of cinema.
And it's gorgeous, too. They should make more movies there.
I hope so. We've tied up with the government of Sikkim. So Sikkim has a lot of issues in general as a region because of insurgency and like a major political unrest. And so this film talks about these kids coming in from Nepal, going into Sikkim, and it talks about the refugee crisis and decisions that parents make, how that affects children, which is, again, so relevant to everything that we're talking about today. So I love the perspective that Paki had on this film, which is talking about all of these serious issues, but from the perspective of these kids, religion. Yeah. Nepal is predominantly Hindu, and Sikkim is predominantly Christian and Buddhist. So hence the kids thinking that the priests are going to eat their children. So what they hear, what adults talk about, how they affect children. So it's such a special film on so many levels, and I'm very proud of it.
Congratulations. You'll continue to make more films through Purple Pebble.
Yes, I do.
I want to ask you about your philanthropic work as well. And first of all, thank you for being one of our ambassadors for our new Share Her Journey
of course.
Campaign. We are looking to support more women in the film industry. We're doing that through a fundraising campaign, and you have kindly agreed to be one of our ambassadors, so thank you very much for that.
Well, of course, Cameron, it's such an important thing, and I was telling Cameron backstage that, unfortunately, we're at a time right now where we still, in 2017, need people like you to actually, give importance and spotlight women in film. And like we were talking about, the kind of, there's only been one director who's ever won an Oscar, female director. Sofia Coppola was the second at Cannes to win Best Director. Females, after having movies, hundreds of years of cinema. So thank you, in fact, for giving us the opportunity and a platform to be able to showcase our work as female filmmakers and female talent. I'm really, really happy to be a part of it.
We're thrilled to be doing this. So thank you, and thanks to all of you who are supporting it as well. You're also doing some pretty heavyweight global stuff as well with UNICEF and with your own Priyanka Chopra Foundation. Can you tell us about what you're doing for girls and women there?
Well, I take it very seriously. We're half of the world, but we're not treated like that. People forget that women's issues are human issues. They're not just women's issues. And people forget that humanity stands for half of us. Women are childbearers and life givers and all of those things which are completely taken for granted because we're supposed to be a certain way, or we're supposed to dress a certain way, or we're supposed to act a certain way. And I am in such a privileged place in society because I was raised by parents who made me a thinking woman. I have friends and family which give me the ability to always have an opinion. I have worked with filmmakers which have faith in me as an actor. But there are kids all over the world who are denied basic education, basic food, basic sanitation, and all of that is, they are being told that they are second class to their brothers or to the boys in villages or small towns that I've visited. And I've done some amazing work with UNICEF over the years. I've been their Goodwill Ambassador in India for about 10 years, and now as their Global Ambassador for about a year and a half, 2 years. And the kind of work and the kind of kids I've seen around the world that I've worked with the tenacity and the resilience that they have, and how badly they just want to go to school. I mean, we take it so for granted, how badly one meal changes their lives. And sitting here in our privileged lifestyles, I really think it's on society to remember that, there's parts of society we've forgotten and we don't want to address because it's just hard to watch. No, don't show me that video because I don't want to see it. It makes me cry. But that's happening. And it's on us sitting in our comfortable homes, in our comfortable chairs, to say, I'm going to watch what's hard, and I'm actually going to do something about it. And working with UNICEF gave me the opportunity to take this privilege that I have and go into these cities and have people follow me and talk about my experiences so the world actually sees it through my eyes, through the privileged eyes that I have.
Is there a girl, whether in India or throughout the rest of the world where you've traveled, where you've noticed a particular impact that you've had through your own work?
Yes. Well, through my own work, or yes. I was in Zimbabwe recently, and I didn't know people watched my films there. I didn't know like I would be known, and I was in this small village in Harare, outside of Harare when we went, and there was this one girl who wrote this poem and a song for me. She wanted to be a musician, and she was raped at the age of 4, and then at the age of 8, and then at the age of 12, and now she was just 15. She wanted to be a musician. And she said, I love pop culture and I love movies, and I just want to be like you because you stand in high heels and you talk really everything that I want to say, and people actually listen to you. I want to be in a place where I can wear high heels and people will listen to me. And it was what did I do to hear a girl sitting in Harare say that her biggest ambition was to be able to have people hear her voice? And she wrote me this beautiful song. And I'm just citing this because this was the most recent example I can remember. But I mean, the things that we do, it's like the butterfly effect. It changes someone's life so far away that we don't even know it. Like with the Priyanka Chopra Foundation for Health and Education as well, which again was my mother's idea. God, that girl has great ideas. I need to come up with some of them myself, I think. But it was again her idea. So my cook in my house, and this was like 2004 or something, she had kids. And one day I came back home from shoot early in the day, and I remember that she was sitting in my library. My cook's daughter must have been about 10 or something, reading a book. And I was like, why aren't you in school? It's time for school right now. And she was like, oh, I don't go to school anymore. So I said, why? She was like, I don't know. Mama said I can't go to school anymore. So I don't know. That bothered me. I must have been 23 or something. And I went and asked her, I was like, why isn't your daughter in school? She was like, I can't afford to send all my kids to school. She's going to get married anyway. And the son's going to earn the money for the family. So what's the point of her education? I don't know why. And this is at home, in my home. It affected me so much. And I remember I went to my mom and I was like, I want to send her to school. This has to happen. How can she be And she's reading a book in my library. She doesn't even know her life has changed. And that's when we decided to start this foundation, and we educate about, it's self-funded, it's extremely small. We educate about 80-something girls across the country by myself. I want to, at some point, make it bigger and include a lot of people, because a lot of people speak to me about wanting to work with kids. But these are kids I know. These are kids who've written to me, and like a lot of my team. And I get their report cards and their letters of, I got these grades in school, and it just makes me feel a really great part of being, in their lives.
And you're still making all those movies and the TV show and everything else, and educating scores of kids as well.
Yeah. Because we can all do that many things. We can.
Yes, you're right. We are going to have to end it there. Priyanka, I want to thank you for taking the time, for sharing your thoughts, for your principle, your talent, your determination and your drive, I think most of all. Thanks partly to Dr. Madhu Chopra, but I think especially to Priyanka Chopra. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Priyanka.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thanks so much.